Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa Ahl Baytihi at-Tayyibin at-Tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. I wanted to, inshallah, begin this Friday session by just briefly introducing Seyed Husayn Razavi, our guest scholar who has been kind enough to join us from the East Coast. I know the East Coast, you guys are many hours ahead of us, and so it's not as early for you as it is for us. Just to quickly introduce Seyed Husayn, his biography is much more extensive than this, but I think he simplified it here. But basically, he was born and raised in New Jersey on the East Coast. He went to university. He went to Rutgers University, graduated in 2008, and that was right around when he left the US and he went to the holy city of Qom, where he studied Islamic sciences for around 9 or 10 years approximately, after which he's come back, and I think he's been back now for the past 3 or 4 years, where he's been busy lecturing as well as doing other religious activities, both on the East Coast as well as throughout the rest of the US. In your opinion, Sayed, what are some of the reasons that we're not really moving forward as a community in relation to the masjid structures that we have?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. One of the challenges that you mentioned is the community issues, and I think there's probably in every community, the community members are going through a hard time, probably both in terms of the administration as well as the congregants who are participating in the programs. When I think of community problems, there's not going to be a perfect community. There's always going to be hardships. There's always going to be hurdles. It's important to keep a pragmatic approach and understand that this is just a normal part of life, that any type of human institution that is there, there's going to be some flaws, there's going to be some challenges. And so we as mu'mineen, we as believers, the first thing I think is important that we should have a pragmatic approach and an understanding that there are challenges, but we should try to look at those challenges that we should be trying to and striving to solve. Alhamdulillah, Allah has given me the opportunity to travel to many different communities. But some of the challenges that I've seen from communities that I'm involved with and that I've traveled is that there's a lack of vision of what the community should be having. What is the future of the community? What function and what role does the masjid have? And I think from a theoretical perspective, when we do not have a clear-cut vision for what the role of the community is, what is the role of a masjid, what is the role of a Husayniyah, what is its purpose, what is its objective, then if we don't have a proper vision, then we cannot gauge how much of that community, how much is it progressing, is it actually moving forward. So I think it's important for community members and the administration, the management, and all the members is to have a proper vision. Like, what is this community supposed to be offering? When we come to the community center, is it just a place for us to come and eat and socialize? Or is it supposed to be something larger than that, something deeper than that? Are we supposed to come to the community center for the sake of learning about our religion? Are we supposed to come to our community center for being around the believers and creating that harmony and that bond? Is the community center a place that when we have an issue, we can come to the community, we can come to the masjid, and we're able to find someone who may help us resolve that, right? So I think the first thing is, in all communities, there needs to be a very clear-cut vision of what exactly is the function that that community is supposed to be fulfilling. A lot of communities, they just have the normal trends of having the programs in Muharram and in Ramadan, and then there's a few programs, the birthdays of the Imam alayhi salam and the death of the Imam. Then it's a sort of the norm which is going, maybe Saturday school, maybe a Sunday school. but that vision needs to be formulated. And until there's not a clear-cut vision, then it becomes difficult for the community to progress.
So Sayed, I mean, one of the
Yeah.
interesting things, do you think that people are too idealistic when it comes to the masjid structure? Or is it just the fact that we're just not planning? Because one of the things I've noticed is that this is an issue all across the board, that whenever we see a masjid, it almost seems like it's an afterthought. The programs, the things which are going on, the idea of like the vision of what we're trying to achieve in 10 years time and 20 years time, it's not really there. It's very fuzzy, so to speak. And
Mm,
the irony of it, which I've had a difficult time understanding, is that the people who go to these centers, they tend to be very educated professionals. So it's
mm.
not an issue of that, for example, they don't have the skills. They do things like this at a higher level at their workplace. But somehow, for some reason, when it comes to the masjid, it seems as if there's a disconnect.
Mm.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Why this is taking
Yeah,
place?
I mean, most of the times we as believers, as mu'mineen, when it comes to our daily lives, when it comes to school, when it comes to education, when it comes to work, when it comes to different aspects of our life, when it comes to our health, when it comes to, family, when it comes to relatives, we tend to be very professional. But when it comes to religion, we sometimes become a little bit irrational. Our expectations are not the most coherent expectations, and we expect some type of miracle to happen. In all other aspects of our life, when it comes to work, we know we have to go and struggle. We know we have to go and get an education. We have to sacrifice. We have to spend time. We have to work overtime. But when it comes to religion, I found that people, they don't have this very realistic approach. They think that just because we're doing something for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as if now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owes us and He's going to take care of us.
Mm,
And unfortunately, when it comes to centers, things are not as professional as they should be. Let me just mention at this point that all credit needs to be given to those individuals who, when they first came to the U.S. and they saw the need of a place and center of worship, they sacrificed their wealth, they sacrificed their time, and they established it. That needs to be very clear, that they made huge sacrifices in order to put us basically on the map. And had they not done that, then probably many of the centers we wouldn't have now. One of the
absolutely.
challenges in the community is that the younger generation, they're not as generous as the previous generations were. The early immigrants that came, they came and they gave a lot and they sacrificed a lot,
Mm,
because they had that sense of identity, which we'll be talking about later on. But the newer generation, as they're progressing, is they don't feel that connection with the center, with the religious values and the religious places of worship. So we need to constantly progress. And when we have a vision, then we can assess ourselves, right? Muhasaba. We talk about muhasaba on an individual level. Well, a muhasaba needs to be also done on a family level and in a large. One of the dars of Ayatollah Jawadi used to mention that we have different centers of influence, spheres of influence, and we should try to impact as much as we can. So obviously the biggest center and sphere of influence that we have is in our own lives, and we should try to alter our lives to make it better, and we should hold ourselves accountable. And slowly there's larger circles which are there. One of the circles is the community, our Muslim community, our Shia community, right? So we have to assess ourselves. Our centers 10 years ago, are they the same as they are now? Or is there any progress? Is there any moving forward? Um, so I think that when it comes to religion, just like we have goals and objectives, we have statements within organizations of what they want to achieve, we also need to have that when it comes to our center.
absolutely. One of the things that I've always been very big on, and usually we don't talk about this, but when it comes to the masajids, a lot of times the structure that we've created is a volunteer structure.
Hmm.
And there's a lot to be said about why this is the way it is, going back to the whole structure of the 501(c)(3)s in the US, the nonprofit charity structure that the government has created. And there's a lot to be said about that side of it. But I think one of the natural end results is that when you have a institution that is a nonprofit, meaning that there's a sense, and this isn't necessarily all nonprofits, but many of our masajids, they function in the sense that the people that run it are not really paid, right? So everyone is essentially going to work, they have their own 9 to 5, and then when they come home, whatever little energy they have left, if they have any energy, usually they don't have anything left, right? They're putting that little bit into the masjid. And I think naturally the end result is not going to be that good, right? If the person that's running it is literally, that's the last thing on his to-do list on that day, then he's not going to be able to sit there and say, okay, well, what do we need to achieve in 10 years time? What do we need to achieve in 15, 20 years time? And the same thing goes again for scholars, that again, most scholars don't want to mention this, but when it comes to the issue of scholarly compensation and the wages which are typically paid to scholars, it's so little that oftentimes the mental state of a scholar, they're attending to their communal affairs, to the affairs of the community, but at the same time they're also trying to make ends meet. And we've all heard the horror stories, right?
Yeah.
That most the average person has not heard about these stories of the person that, for example, on his off time, he's going doing pizza delivery, right? Or whatever is going on, whatever ways that scholars try to make ends meet. And I think that's also a huge issue, that if you don't have the basics because the community does not care enough to offer you wages which are living wage, we talk about living wage for example, everyone else, then I think naturally an end result is going to be that a person in that state is not going to be able to think 10 years or 20 years down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a hadith from the Imam where he says, from Imam Ali, where he says, if poverty was to come into a form of a human being, laqataltuhu, that I would have gone and slain that person. If poverty was embodied in the individual, then I would have gone and slain that person. And I mean, that's a very telling hadith, because it shows that when a person goes and suffers through poverty, it sort of prevents them from doing a lot of other things in their life. If a person doesn't have food to eat, if a person cannot support their family, I mean, what expectations should we have from that person to be able to give to the community, right? It becomes extremely challenging. And yeah, you mentioned it was sort of a very sensitive topic about ulama, and how should they be operating, how should they be self-sufficient, how should they be independent, without obviously by maintaining their dignity within the community, because nobody wants to go and ask people for money, and and request people to give them donations and charity. So an alim, especially somebody who's studied, somebody who's well grounded in their Islamic knowledge, how should they be compensated, and to what extent should they be taken care of, so that they can perform their function to the community. If the, like you mentioned, if the alim is so busy, working and trying to bring food on his table, then he will not be able to prepare for his lectures. He will not be able to give to the community the best of his ability. And that's unfortunate, that a person who went and studied for years and sacrificed a lot, he's working on these secondary, things in order to keep his family afloat.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I've been noticing with our generation, the last generations, they had their own dynamic. But one of the things that I've been noticing in regards to our generation is that many of the people that we studied with, they're coming back and they're looking at, kind of where they want to go with life. And for a number of them, they're selecting and they're choosing. They're saying that I don't want to become a resident alim, because I have all these different options, right? I could go and teach at a university. I could go and become a chaplain at a university or at a hospital. And so there's a lot of other options that people have, which they can be taking those options and they can be doing religious work. But, on the side of finances, they're also covered as well. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing a trend, at least from my perspective. You might have a different view on this, but what I've been noticing is that many of our generation, they're saying, well, I would like to be a resident alim, but it's just not an option that I see as a practical option, right? And so
Yeah.
many people are kind of taking these other paths. And unfortunately, the problem with that is, if we don't have enough resident alims and we don't have enough people who are actually directly doing work for the community, meaning that if someone is a chaplain or if someone is a professor at a university, yeah, they'll be helping here and there whenever they can in the community, but that's not going to be their main job. And so
Yeah.
again, we go back to that issue. It's almost like a volunteer thing, that they're putting in that 10% or whatever, extra time that they have, and they're giving it back to their community. But then that goes back to that issue of vision, that if we're trying to plan 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, then we have to be really thinking about how do we change this model.
Yeah. There's a saying from Imam Khomeini where he says, for every 10 people, there should be one alim. meaning that for every 10 families that are there, there should be one alim, one scholar who's actually providing services to them for,
Right.
for that family, for their children, for the couple, giving them constant, education and guidance. That the role of an alim is actually very large in a community, right? The example is given as a hospital, right? If the building is there, if the institution is there, but if the doctor is not there, then what's the point of the hospital, right? But a doctor can also operate even if there is no institution, right? So the role of an alim is similar to that. That it's crucial in an organization for the alim to be there and for him to be able to put the best of his ability in order to bring the community forward. And you're right that many of the younger scholars and scholars who've come here now, they're sort of forced to go and work full time. Some of them work as a psychologist, as counselors. And last Ramadan, several communities last Muharram, several communities asked me to find a speaker for them. And I spoke to several scholars, and they said that no, we can't take off of work for 10 days because we're
Yeah.
working. And it was a bit sad that they spent so many years in the Hausa, and they can't take off for 10, 12 days because, well, they're committed to work, and it could cause problems at work. Um, so I mean, yeah, those challenges, they're definitely there. Um,
Mhm. Language issues, say it. I
yeah.
know we've gone back and forth with this, that you know we again, going back to 30, 40 years ago, and this isn't to speak negatively, because again, the individuals who actually organized these massages, literally they gave everything in this path. But at the same time, we structured our masjids, I think, and this is something which is very apparent to everyone, on a or on an ethnic kind of a model. That
Mm,
there was a masjid that was the kind of the Urdu Desi masjid. There was
yeah.
the masjid that was like the Iranian Afghan masjid, and for example, the Arab masjid. And now we're kind of seeing even like there's splits between, there's the Iraqi Arab, right? There is the Lebanese Arab, right? So they're splitting even into these further groups.
Mm.
What do you think on this? I mean, should we go towards an all English model? Because I've seen the masjids which do that. They say, look, we're just going to do all English because we can't, we don't have this option of doing these different languages. What do you think on this? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it depends on the community, right? An ideal situation would be, to have one community center, and in that one community center, everybody gathers together and has majalis together. Maybe perhaps in larger communities where there's a good participation in Arabic language and Farsi language and other languages, and maybe multiple parallel programs can be going on. But those type of centers are very few. I think in Sabah, that's probably a good example where that community center is large enough where it can sustain 4 parallel programs.
Yeah.
Other centers, they definitely cannot do that, because of the fact that, well, the participation from the community is not as much. I mean, in those cases, we have to look at the maslaha amma. We have to look at the general interest of the community. And the general interest of the community is, what is that language in which everybody can understand the message and get the guidance, right? And for us living in America, the language of communication is in English, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran too that وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a messenger, he would always send a messenger in the language of the people, right?
Mhm.
Using their phrases, using their vernacular, using those terms, so that the people there they can understand, they can connect. I remember even when I was growing up, because there was a very big insistence on some of the community members to have programs in Urdu, and we would have ulama who came from India, Pakistan, very very learned people, very pious people. But when they would come, they would speak in a very flowery language. So
Mm.
we would sit in a majlis, and we wouldn't know what was being said, and we would just sit there just extremely frustrated. Imagine, like, we're 10, 12, we're teenage years, and we're forced to sit down and listen to something that we don't understand.
Sayed,
um,
I think you were more patient than I was, because we would just get up and leave.
Yeah, well, I mean, see, that goes back to sort of the approach that our parents had, right? For our parental generation, I think for them, language is something very sensitive.
Mm.
and they feel as if that if their children can speak their language, then they've sort of been successful in passing on that identity. That was sort of their approach, and I think I think that sort of has hindered a lot of things, because without with an emphasis on language rather than having an emphasis on understanding the religion,
Mm.
then the guidance part becomes a little bit weaker, right? People, they can speak the language, but they don't understand the religion. When the scholars, when and the majalis happen, they don't understand what is the message which should be getting out, which they should be understanding.
Mm.
I think for the general part, most programs, most community centers, it should be done in English. Why? Because then all of the community members, they can participate, and most importantly, it's the youth who is going to be running the centers in the in the next 10 years, in the next 15 years, the next decade, 2030. Who's going to be running the centers?
I think
You know,
right now that you said that, people are gonna start sweating. All those 20-year-olds and 25-year-olds are sweating right now because I mean it's a heavy responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy responsibility. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of sacrifice. In Ramadan, Alhamdulillah, this Ramadan was a bit unique because most of us had iftar at home. But I know in the community centers in Ramadan, I mean, people reach a level of exhaustion in terms of cleaning up, in terms of the food, and it becomes very, very challenging.
Mm.
Long nights. It's long days. I mean, and not enough sleep. So, I mean, the torch needs to be passed to the next generation. And the next generation can only take ownership of the community centers if they feel as if this religion is theirs, if this identity that they have, they can connect with Islam. If they cannot connect with Islam on that level, then it's going to become difficult for them to sacrifice, because two things are synonymous: love and sacrifice. The more you love something, the more you're willing to sacrifice for that. So the more you love Islam, the more you're willing to sacrifice for it. Like if somebody loves their wife, and they're gonna go and they're gonna sacrifice a lot for their wife, right? They're gonna put themselves through discomfort, through hardship, for the sake of that love, right? For cherishing that love. And the same thing comes to our community centers, right? The community center should be a place that we love to come, love to volunteer, love to put our time. And when that is there, then we're able to sacrifice both in terms of our, financials, monetary, as well as in terms of our time, and offering our services. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean,
Absolutely. I think
there's
it's
a lot of community issues. I mean, like one, but
yeah.
I think one of the things is, there's this beautiful hadith from the Prophet, narrated both in Shia and Sunni traditions,
Mm.
and I think it's one of those hadith that should be, put in gold and should be recited every day.
Yeah.
The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, "Tafa'alu bil khair tajiduhu." One of the things that, this is like one of those hadith which talk about mindset. He says, "Tafa'alu bil khair." He said, always anticipate things are going to be good,
Mm.
right? Tajiduhu. Then what will happen is you will find it, right? So whenever when it comes to a community, I think that optimistic attitude needs to be there. Not being discouraged with the politics, with the disagreements, sometimes even the fights that may happen, right? We like these type of differences that happen between language, between Farsi, Urdu, and English. Like we shouldn't cause those to make us paralyzed, to
Mm.
shun the center and saying that we're not going to come. One of the community centers I went to, because it was done in they had some type of disagreement over language, and it became very harsh. They split off and they started having majalis in their own home, right? And that's unfortunate, that the community should not be split, to the best of its ability, right? Especially in a small community, those type of things are very unfortunate. So having this mindset of that we're optimistic, that things are going to be good, things are going to be better, I think that's really important, especially for the younger generation, because when they come to the center and they see a lot of negative things are happening, they're like, we don't want to deal with this, and then they end up leaving, and they never come back. When we see disagreements and hardships, we should try to go and see how we can contribute in resolving those things. Quitting and turning away, those things are not going to be there. And like for example, this language issue, right? Suppose in a community center they really emphasize on doing it in their traditional language. Well, I mean, try to find a way that we can work it out. Maybe from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, have the program in Arabic or in Farsi or in Urdu, and then from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, have the program in English. Try to get away, try to cooperate and collaborate in a manner so that everybody is happy, right? Focusing on solutions. I mean, that's really important. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's important that programs, they should be done in English, because that's the language in which the youth, they think in. That's the language in which they operate. So if they hear terminology which they cannot connect to the way that they intellectually approach life, then there's always going to be a disconnect between that and Islam. So by removing that disconnect, by having a speaker who can speak their language, use their terms, I think it just brings Islam a little bit closer to their heart, right?
Absolutely. That's, I mean, a lot of good points, especially the one on focusing on the solutions. Because I know, our initial kind of the way that we tend to react is whenever we run into an issue, we say, you know what, these people are horrible people. In fact, the non-Muslims are much better. They have better akhlaq, they have better this, they have better that. And we go completely the other way in terms of extremes. And then, we see people, they just split off and we don't see them for years. And I've seen the consequences of this, that,
Yeah,
suddenly I see them after 5 years, 10 years. I'm like, how are you doing? And they've completely changed.
yeah,
And I think there's an aspect that we have to really understand, that when we separate ourselves from the religious community, regardless of the issues that are going to exist, every family is going to have its own issues. There's no perfect family. It might seem as if other families are perfect, right? But every family has its own issues, including the Muslim family, including the Muslim ummah. And so when we see these kinds of things, it's critical that we remain and we kind of try to fix those problems that we're seeing. And the
yeah,
most dangerous thing, the most dangerous impulse, is splitting off and going and trying to do something on our own.
yeah,
And the irony of this, when you mentioned usually it's the smaller centers, we see that it's a tiny center, there's like 50 people, and they're already kind of, the issues are coming up and they're like, we're about to split.
yeah.
I'm looking around, I'm like thinking to myself, split into what? You're not even whole yet. You don't even have enough for, an actual masjid yet. You want to split into something even smaller. And so definitely that's a really beautiful point, that we have to always be moving forward and always be positive that inshallah things will work out. One
Yeah,
of the things
sorry, just one issue that I just
of
want
course,
to
please.
bring up is that I find that, especially when it comes to our religious communities, is that people are very judgmental about other people,
Hmm.
and I think that's very dangerous. That we should never be in a state where we judge other people's faith. You know, I think one of the things is that a person may do something in a center which may be, for example, considered taboo. We shouldn't judge and we shouldn't treat them in a cold manner. Like I remember in a center one time, a convert brother came in and he extended his feet. And in our Desi culture, and I think maybe in Iranian culture too, extending the feet is considered to be really bad. You don't do that, especially to elders. And somebody came and gave him a mouth, earful of, this is disrespectful, you don't come here, don't you know anything about your religion, whatever. And then that brother, he just left, and we never saw him come back, right? I mean, it's important that when it comes to our like the prophet, one of the things that the prophet did was, prophet, he always used to see the good in people, right? When Abu Sufyan, when he accepted Islam, prophet also accepted him, although he knew it was for ulterior reasons, but he saw the good in people. And I think that's important, that we shouldn't you know we shouldn't judge other people's faith. We shouldn't try to judge other people's religiosity, because that's something which is detrimental. Once you start pointing out flaws in other people, they did this, they did that, they're insincere, they're doing it for ulterior motives, it's something which is contagious, and it's very hard to control. I mean, like some of these basic akhlaqi things.
Like a contagious
um,
disease almost. It's like coronavirus, right?
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
a coronavirus. So I think being judgmental is actually very detrimental, especially on a community level.
You
Yeah,
you mentioned that the whole idea that these basically munafiqs would come and they would accept Islam. And I remember one of the stories related to this, that the prophet would respond, because people would say, Ya Rasulullah, these individuals are hypocrites. And one of the beautiful things that he would say, he would say that perhaps their children will become like
Yeah,
sincere followers of Islam.
absolutely.
And one of the things that we see in history is, for example, the son of Abu Jahl, Ikrama, he
Mm,
ends up becoming a very devout Muslim,
mm,
right? And so you have these situations where the children of some of the worst enemies of the Holy Prophet, because of that non-judgmental attitude, that very openness, that you are a human being, you have the potential to reach that position of paradise, that we
yeah.
would see that these individuals, the next generations, they would accept Islam and they would become some of the best Muslims.
Mm. There's a beautiful story in the Quran about Nabi Shu'aib.
Mm.
When Nabi Musa came to Madain, Nabi Musa was a fugitive. He was running away. He didn't have anything, you know. But Nabi Shu'aib, like, he saw the good in Nabi Musa, that, he didn't have anything. He killed somebody, for goodness sake, right? I mean, that's a big crime. But what does Nabi Shu'aib do? Nabi Shu'aib accepts him. He doesn't judge him. He doesn't, make a character, judgment on him. But rather, he sees the good. He sees that he's a prophet of Allah. He sees that, somebody who's a good worker. He gave him a job. He gave him his daughter to marry. I mean, that's a good example for us to learn from, that Nabi Shu'aib had towards. And he only did that was because he didn't judge. He did. I mean, I found that a lot of times religious people, they tend to judge others more than other groups of people. And
as
something
as I
to
like to
be.
say, they judge more than God does. Even God, he's saying, look, I haven't closed the book yet, the door of repentance is open, we're going to hold and see how you end up. And then the religious people are like, no, this is a person of the hellfire, right? It's
Yeah, exactly. We don't know. Maybe that person did something wrong and Allah forgave that person. But in your own heart, in our own heart, we're reminding ourselves that they did that wrong thing, they committed that sin. Maybe they asked Allah for forgiveness and Allah forgive them. So what's the point of us holding that grudge and being judgmental against them?
SubhanAllah. Yeah, absolutely. Said, I just wanted to open up the floor if anyone
Sure,
has any
sure. Yeah.
questions on this issue before we move on. If anyone has any questions, we'll just hold for maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Please type your questions out. For those of you on Facebook, we're actually primarily on Zoom, so I won't necessarily see what's going on Facebook. Although perhaps somebody can forward any questions if anyone is asking them on Facebook as well. You can forward them to us, inshallah. So a question that was asked, Sayed, and I'm going to ask this from you, is then what is the ideal masjid? What type of program would we be seeing? Obviously, this is a very vast subject, so you're not going to be able to answer comprehensively, but just in a short few points, what would you say in regards to this? That if you could build the ideal masjid, how would you build it?
An ideal masjid. I would say an ideal masjid is a place where we get constant guidance. Where the purpose of a masjid is hidayah,
Mhm.
is for guidance, is that our iman becomes stronger. We come to a masjid, we learn about our religion. We come to a masjid, we have this sense of belonging, right? We come and we pray together. We stand next to one another, right? We're seen as one unit in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I think of an ideal masjid, a place where the old and the young, where they can come together, where they can communicate, where they can sit down, where they can, have those bonds of brotherhood among them. If I need any type of help, then I can turn to one of them and ask them for aid and assistance without being judged. I mean, I think, the main thing is guidance. And guidance has many different forms. One is obviously the intellectual aspect, but also guidance in that we belong to a community. We belong to the center. The center is ours. I think those type of things are important for us to have in an ideal masjid. And if we're able to have those things, then the programmings and everything else will fall in its place. Um, I think guidance is the most important issue. And so in order for guidance to be there, it obviously requires leadership to share the same perspective, right? So for guidance to be there, there needs to be learned people there. There needs to be learned individuals there. There are individuals who can answer the questions of the people, the shubahat, the misconceptions that people have. An ideal place would be a place where the youth can come. I remember when I was in Qom, I went to go meet one of the scholars, and he asked me about, what are you guys doing in America? So I was like, Alhamdulillah, we have many masajid. We have many Imam Bargas and Husainiyas. And he's like, well, what about the youth? And I'm like, well, the youth, they come, sometimes they don't come. And then he told me something interesting. He said that, if I was to come to America, the first place that I wouldn't build a masjid. I said, okay. So what would you build? He said, I would build a varzishgah. I would build a place of sports, a sports facility, a place where they can play basketball, a place where they can play soccer, a place where they can have fun. He said, because when you get those youth to come, those youth will eventually come and they'll bring in their parents, right? And that's a very interesting, observation that he had. If we're forward thinking, then a part of our masjid should be sports activities, should be a place where we can have physical activities, where we can socialize, where we can have fun, where we can enjoy, right? A lot of times religious people, they tend to be very strict, very rigid, and that's not what actually, when I remember reading that one of the things that they objected against Imam Ali becoming the Khalifa was they said that Imam would joke too much. He would be too jolly. So how can somebody who's so jolly, how can such a person be a Khalifa, right? He's too young, right? But I mean, a place where there's this positivity, place where there's optimism, a place where
Said, you mentioned an interesting point. You said that the scholar had said that the youth would then bring their parents.
yeah.
A lot of times we think of it the opposite way, right? It's that the parents need to come and then they will bring their kids, and usually by force, right? You have to put the chains on and you have to put the blindfolds on and you have to kind of bribe them, and then you have to drag the kids into the masjid. But what you mentioned, it reminded me of the time of the Holy Prophet, that many of the people who were converting, they were youth. They were young people, because they had that sense of spiritual freedom, that they could say, look, this is the truth. I'm going to follow this. And then they would also bring the rest of their family members along with them as well. So that's a really deep point. A lot of times we think of it the other way, right?
Yeah.
But perhaps if we made our masajids more youth-centric, then in reality it would be something that everyone would be driven or be attracted towards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, there's young people, because they're at the peak of their life, peak of their peak of energy, they can make changes, and using those changes, they can even change their parents. I had a mother who called me once, and she said that, I want you to tell my daughter to not wear the hijab. And the daughter was wearing hijab. And I said, well, why are you telling her not to wear the hijab? And she's like, well, she can't wear the hijab because, people are very hostile towards Islam, and, her life can be in danger. Somebody can kidnap her. Somebody can hit her. Somebody can do anything, right? But the daughter, her faith was so strong that even despite her mother saying that, not to wear hijab, she still wore the hijab. And, when I visited that community again, I met the mother, and the mother said, my daughter, she motivated me to wear the hijab. I saw somebody who's so young, somebody who's living in this environment, compared to me. She was from Pakistan. I grew up in a Muslim country, Muslim family. I don't wear the hijab, but my daughter, look at her strength that she has, right? And she derived the strength from her daughter, and she started wearing the hijab, right? So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He guides in very mysterious ways. We don't know. Sometimes our children, they can be the means of our guidance, right? So
that's an amazing point. Yeah, we tend to look at it the opposite way, but I think sometimes perspective is a very important thing. Seyed, I think we should move on to, wow,
sure.
the time has gone really fast. So
Yeah.
7:50, we don't have too much time, but let's inshallah move on to the second issue that we had, the political issues and kind of where we stand. And I know that it's a very confusing subject. And, from my own perspective, I remember back during the time of, let's say, George W. Bush. I remember that most of the Muslim community at that time, they were what we would consider to be Republicans. They tended to be very conservative. And what ended up happening was there was a shift, right? So there was a number of wars that took place, and the Republicans were then seen as, for example, individuals that were very harsh against the Muslims. And then so now we're kind of seeing this reverse trend where people are moving towards more progressive politics, and some of that includes things which are a little bit problematic from an Islamic perspective, including, the whole issue of LGBTQ rights and all of the stuff that comes along with that. And so it's very difficult. I think that Muslims, especially the young generation, is coming up and they're trying to balance Islamic values right? With all of this stuff that's going on, and they're trying to say, okay, well, how do we, which of these groups do we follow? Who do we vote for? How do we align ourselves politically? What are some thoughts that you have on this subject?
Yeah, I
And I
mean,
know it's a really vast. I mean, it's a really. I just threw that all at you, but it's a very vast subject.
yeah, I mean, it's a very contentious issue as well. I don't know if there's one right answer to this, right? I
Yeah,
mean, we're part of an ulama group, and you saw how much disagreement even among ulama
yeah,
about political issues. How much should we be politically expressive? Should we be voting? Should we be participating in the local government, in the federal government? I mean, those are major issues. And I mean, I don't know if there's one right answer that can solve it, right?
mm-hmm.
I think individuals need to work on different levels. So that means that certain individuals, they can work on a political level. Certain individuals are good at working at a grassroots level. So I mean, people have to find their role and try to maximize their influence based on the role that they have. I mean, we're pretty clear when it comes to our religion that supporting oppressive regimes, supporting subjugation, supporting racism and discrimination, these things are condemned. That there's no place for it, right? One of the things of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi al Munkar is at the first level, which is wajib aini, which means it is wajib upon everybody, is in our heart, we have an aversion to that which is munkar, right? In our hearts, we should feel, what's the word for a completely repulsed by when
Disgust.
we see something, yeah, when we see something evil, right? So when we see something wrong which is happening, when we see some type of oppression, we should never in our heart feel, what's the word that I'm looking for? Disinterested. We should never feel as if, well, it doesn't have anything to do with me. It doesn't relate to my life. No, the first level is if we see something which is bad, which is happening, we should feel repulsed. We should feel, disgusted by that. We should, in our hearts, we should try to, not accept such a thing, not just dismiss it and be like, well, that doesn't have anything. So what if there's a war in Afghanistan? So what if there's in Iraq? I'm living here. What if they're bombing Yemen? That doesn't matter to me. I'm here, living my life. What concerns me is myself. Right? I mean, that approach I think is very wrong. So I think as a baseline is that we should be aware of what is happening, and when we know when something wrong is happening, we should dislike that in our hearts, right? I mean, the Quran talks about political things. The Quran talks about the Pharaoh. Quran talks about Nimrud. So we cannot separate our religion from politics, right? Religion and politics, they're intertwined. But the difference is politics comes from religion, right? Our religion teaches us how we should be political. And I mean, I think as
Sayed, I
long
think
as
for many people, the problem is that they're it's the reverse. That the religion, it comes from the politics. Yeah,
yeah,
that in a lot of times we see, for example, with the evangelicals, right, the religious beliefs that they have has become subservient to the politics. The politics are more important. And I
yeah,
think that's a beautiful point, that if we are, looking at it from that perspective, then definitely we're going to have all sorts of issues.
yeah, yeah. Now, you mentioned a good point about some of these devout Christians, how they're supporting Trump.
Right.
And I had a discussion a couple of months ago that some of these guys were ardent Trump supporters. And I said, you're religious. Do you really think that Jesus would support somebody like Trump, somebody who's giving misogynistic statements, somebody who says things against immigrants? Jesus used to go and wash the feet of beggars and poor people. And I mean, where's this contradiction which is happening? And their justification was that, well, he's enhancing our religious and our political goals, so thus we support them. And like, we don't believe that. We don't think that the ends, it means they don't justify the ends. We
Yeah.
believe that everything should be in the process, should be done correctly in order for us to arrive at the correct end. If the means are not correct, then the ends are not going to be correct.
What you said reminds me of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, that when the Khilafah was taken from him, some individuals, they approached him, individuals such as Abu Sufyan. They said, Ya Ali, we have the military force, we can take this Khilafah from you. he looks at the situation and he realizes that, again, the process that he would have to go through in order to take that power, that itself was destructive.
Mm.
That itself would end up with the end result, which was not the end result, which was in the favor of the religion of Islam. And I think a lot of times we tend to make decisions that are based on that. We say, well, as long as the kind of the ends justify the means, then that's fine. Then we can, for example, do these kinds of iffy actions in order to get to that, for example, that bigger goal. And
Yeah.
Islamically, over and over and over again, especially as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, we find how this is not the case.
Yeah.
How the Ahlul Bayt, they lived lives which were actually completely opposite, that they were saying, look, not only is the end important, but the means are also critical as well.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
You can get even to that end, but if you have changed yourself through those corrupt actions, then there's no point. You've destroyed yourself to reach that, for example, that goal. And that's really a beautiful point. Sayed, a question has come in. I just wanted to ask this from you. Being immigrants, our parents have certain expectations like education, financial health, language, etc. And if the kids usually fail to meet those, their parents are disappointed. Um, in these times when living a simple life is expensive, individuals have to work hard to put food on the table while meeting at least some of these expectations from the parents, expectations from the parents and the society. How can we as Muslims find a way to balance kind of what, I guess the question what it's asking is, how do we find a way to balance the expectations that our parents have from us, the society has from us, with our responsibilities that we have towards the religion?
Mm. Yeah.
Because, let me put it this way. I'll just add this in as well, that many times parents, they may have expectations which go against religious values, for example. It's
Mm.
possible.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to parents, I get reminded by this thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to test each and every one of us. And He's going to test us with that thing which we are the most vulnerable with.
Mm.
So that may mean that sometimes He tests us with wealth. He may test us with sickness. He may test us with education, right? But one of the most difficult tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us with is with our parents. And it's not an easy thing, they have certain expectations, and we have a very emotional connection with our parents, right? And if they have a certain expectation from us, we want to try to fulfill that to the best of our ability. It's important that, especially as we get older, that we have this level of communication with our parents which is open. They understand our feelings. They understand that we are our own independent individuals. We have our own dreams. We have our own wishes. And we love and we respect our parents. But at the end of the day, what I'm going to do with that which is the best for me and for my family and my future. I think, by explaining this to parents in a very soft manner, in a very gentle manner, I think slowly they're going to eventually make that shift towards coming to this understanding that our children are going to be living their own lives, and our responsibility is, as parents, what does Islam define the responsibility of parents towards their children? Is that they should be able to give them a proper Islamic guidance and teaching so that they can be practicing Muslims. This is the most important expectation that Islam has from parents, that by the time they become baligh, that we should instill those values within them, that they practice and they stay upon the religion of Islam, right? That is the most important expectation that parents should have, right? There's a saying that heaven or Harvard, right? If you ask parents, do you want your child to go to heaven or do you want your child to go to Harvard? Everybody with their tongues, they say we want our child to go to heaven. But based on their actions, they all want their children to go to Harvard, right? Heaven is something which is secondary, right?
I mean, heaven is found in Harvard, right?
Heaven is found in Harvard. So yeah, it's not an easy thing, but I think by communicating with parents, allowing them to understand that your expectations, we value them, we respect them, and understanding the position that they're coming from. They're looking for our well-being. So when they have certain financial expectations from us, when they have certain other different types of expectations, it's because they're doing it out of our own goodness, right? They want to see our lives happy. They want to see our success, right? They're not doing it out of selfish reasons. They think that this is the way to be happy, right? I mean, a young man, probably in his mid 30s, he called me up, and he said, he wanted to start his own business for many years, but his mom and dad didn't want him to, quit his full-time job and start his business. And he's like, I know that, there's a certain niche here, but my parents, they don't want me to, quit my job. They want me to have this traditional 9 to 5 job, have insurance, have family, have stability. um, and it really stifled him. Psychologically, he was really affected by it because of that emotional connection. Right? A lot of times parents, they can emotionally blackmail us, and that's not a good thing, right? But at the end of the day, this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us, right? We have to be able to communicate with them in a certain manner so that they understand our wishes, they understand what our goals, what our objectives are, what we want to accomplish with our lives. And by removing the emotion from our parents, removing the emotion from that conversation, then I think that opens a door for better relationships, as well as for a more sort of a realistic uh, approach in terms of expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the point that you mentioned on removing the emotion from it. That's probably the most difficult part, because usually when we care about people, emotions tend to come in, right? And then when emotions tend to come in, we tend to get very upset, and now you're not speaking rationally, and you're not even trying to fix the issue. You're not trying to communicate. You're just simply trying to just get rid of that emotional load.
Yeah, and parents have that. Parents have that emotional. I can give you an example. Like, my nephew came over, a couple of months ago, and he didn't want to eat his dinner. So it's like, okay, I told him, if you don't want to eat your dinner, okay, it's not a big deal. You don't have to eat it. And then my son was like, I don't want to eat my dinner. I was like, no, you better eat your dinner. What do you mean you can't get away with eating your dinner? And it was like, well, why is there that discrepancy, right? If he doesn't want to eat his dinner, the nephew, then why are you getting upset with him? And my own son, doesn't want to eat his dinner because that emotional connection is stronger. And I realized, oh, that's also within me, right? Allah has placed that within parents, where they want to see their children succeed and reach their absolute best.
And I think that's a test as well, like just like you were mentioning, that Allah will test us in different ways. One of the tests can be for parents, that when it comes to their children, they should look at them as a unique individual, not as an extension of their own, for example, unfulfilled hopes and dreams that they haven't been able to achieve. That in some cases, parents, when they look at their kids, they're seeing, okay, well, I wasn't able to become a doctor, now you have to become a doctor, right? I
Yeah.
sacrificed X amount so that. And I think it's important for parents to really recognize that their children have their own unique personalities, their own unique strengths and weaknesses, and to force them into a mold is a type of oppression as well on their behalf. And so I think this works on both ends, that not only do the children have to be very respectful, they need to deal with their parents with a attitude of love, but the parents also need to disengage a little bit and realize that, look,
Mm,
I want the best for my child. What the best is for my child may not necessarily be that idea that I have in my mind.
yeah. Like, one technique that I found, which is very effective dealing with parents, is bringing in a neutral figure.
Mm,
Bringing in a figure which is sort of the liaison between the children and the parents, a respectable figure. And by the child going and explaining their feelings and their emotions to that individual, and getting that individual to speak to the parents, then sometimes if it comes from someone other than the child, then it's the parents are better, they're willing to receive it a little bit better, right? They're more receptive to it. So having like an individual, perhaps an uncle, perhaps an elderly cousin, maybe a sibling, an elder sibling, somebody who the parents, they respect, as well as the child they respect, they can sort of serve as a liaison, and
mhm.
it sort of serves as a buffer between the two. And I mean, I think that sort of allows things to sort of de-escalate, and hopefully things will sort of resolve from that point on, when another party is brought in.
Yeah, I think that was the role. Like back in the day, you had like the elder figures of the family, and they had that respect, and they kind of naturally played that role of a moderator, right?
Yeah,
Making everything work and making sure no one fights and no one argues. And they had that ability. Not only did they have the wisdom of their years, but they also had the ability to kind of emotionally divest themselves from the situation and be very fair, while also being very practical. Knowing how the society and the community works.
yeah.
So I think
So I mean,
definitely.
like a good.
Yeah, yeah,
Go
please,
ahead.
please. No, no,
No,
go
no,
ahead.
it goes back to something that you mentioned. We were talking about this a couple of days ago, where everybody wants to have that attitude where, we're all brothers, right? Like
Yeah.
we're all friends with one another. That level of respect for somebody who's older than us, that's not there anymore, right? Remember you mentioned we were
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about that, and I think that's important for us to maintain that certain people, they have a certain level of respectability just because they're older than us, and we should value that, right? We have even a hadith that says that when you meet an older person, remind yourself that this person is better than you because they had a longer life and they were able to do more good deeds than you have. You know, so I mean, I think that that level of respect, especially for elders, for our uncles, for our grandparents, that's an important thing that we need to have, especially for us when with our parents, right? I think that by having that level of respectability for our parents, and that understanding that they're seeking our own well-being by the things that they demand and expectations that they have, I think it sort of makes the discussion a little bit more gentler.
Absolutely, absolutely, Sayed.
Mm.
A second part of this question that was also actually we had listed it to discuss is this issue of work-life balance. And I know we don't have that much time left. We have about 8 minutes or so left. But when it comes to work-life balance, that's a really big issue in the US. I know that we've both experienced life in the Middle East, and it was on the other side of the spectrum, meaning that if people overwork themselves here to the point where they need, for example, medication to sleep at nights because they're so wound up, right? The Middle East has the opposite issue, that they put in so little work, for example, and again, I'm stereotyping to a degree,
Yeah,
but they put in so little work, for example, that they have way too much time on their hands, and that has its own issues. But definitely in the society that we're living in, what we're seeing is that we all want that lifestyle. We all want that life. We want the nice house in the suburbs. We want that nice car, right? We want to have nice weddings. There's a list of things that we feel is kind of the goal of our lives. And so what that entails is that we have to put in a certain type of work hours. We have to have certain types of jobs. And what really has ended up happening for not just Muslims, this is a common societal issue,
mm,
is that many Americans, whether Muslim or not, they find that they're working way too much.
yeah,
And then this is affecting things not just in terms of spirituality, but when it comes to their marriages, when it comes to the relationship they have with their children, the education, the Islamic education of their children, it's having effects on all of these things.
mm.
How do we fix this? I mean, what perspective do we need to have so that we don't overwork ourselves and we don't underwork ourselves either?
Well, I mean, I guess with the unemployment rate going so high, it's in the benefit where people are not working as much, right? But yeah, I mean, we need moderation in our
So,
in our
Said, you're
lives.
saying that the solution is more coronavirus and unemployment.
More, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I mean, I think one of the things that I find effective is having a schedule. Having certain time for work, having certain time for family, having certain time for leisure. If we can try to make a schedule where we can have time for work. Okay, fine. Work takes 8.5 hours. Okay, you put that time in for work. And then what about the rest of your day? You know, time spent with your family, time spent for your own reading, for your own education, for your own guidance. The weekend, Saturday and Sunday. I mean, the way our lives are shaped in the West is it's like a rat race. Our central focus is work. Even on the weekends. I was reading this article that people, the day of the week that they get the most sick is on Sunday. Why? Because the next day is Monday. So they
Wow.
tend to have a lot of these panic attacks on Sunday night. Um, so I mean, understanding that we need a balance in our life, and it's not an easy thing, especially when both parents, or the mother and the father, when they're both working. It becomes very difficult for the child. I mean, the last few months, the last 3 months, I mean, I've been dealing with couples who are having a very difficult time because the kids are at home, right? And both the mother and father are working at home. So who's going to be taking care of the kids? Who's going to be taking the breakfast out? Who's going to be? I mean, it becomes a very challenging thing. And I think by having a schedule, by having certain types of activities that the husband does, that the wife does, I think those type of things will sort of remediate those types of problem. Um, it's not an easy. It's one of the challenges that you mentioned, that the work-life balance. I don't know if there's a solution for it But as long as we're trying to improve our schedules, improve our time which is spent with our families, and but also understanding that, listen, our priority in our life is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right?
Mm.
One of the things that we have in Tawheed Amali. Tawheed Amali is that our lives are oriented with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That whatever we do, we don't have, everything is what they say, wirdan wahida. Everything is one thing. Everything is service in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we work, we remind ourselves we're working for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We never work for money. We're working to support our family. And supporting our family, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure lies in this. And so, this is a hadith that says, what does it say? Al-kad ala, what is it? Al-kad ala iyalihi kal mujahid fi sabilillah. That the one who struggles for his family is like a mujahid in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So understanding that even if we're working a lot, we're working long hours, that our objective and our perspective is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're doing this for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if it means sacrificing, if it means, putting in extra hours, well, we're doing this because the main reason, the primary reason is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's satisfaction. So reminding ourselves of what our orientation is, what our priorities are. I think these type of things, they will help us out in achieving this work-life balance. And when work is done, put the work cell phone away. Don't open the work email. A lot of times those things, they sort of leave a residue on the person's mind. They're checking, did I get an email from work? Did I get a call from work? Certain times you just have to put all technology away. Put your cell phone away, put your tablet away. You just need time to be spent, some time to be spent to be on your own, where you sit by yourself, where you introspect, where you reflect, and some time where you worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by yourself, right? There's certain times where, my kids, we all try to pray salah together. And then there's certain times where I'm like, no, you're not praying with me because you guys are making too much noise. I can't concentrate. You guys go over there. I'm going to a room and I lock my door and I say, listen, I'm going to pray here. And so, I think by doing these type of things, that they'll help us in sort of in achieving that work-life balance.
Absolutely. And I think, Seyed, one of the things that we were speaking about before as well is that at some level too, we're going to have to bring down our expectations of what we want out of life. And it's difficult, and it goes back to what you were saying, that we have to really prioritize that. Okay, I'm here on this earth for a number of years, right? Some people are going to get longer, some people are going to get shorter. But at the end of the day, the average person doesn't live for very long. 75 years, 80 years, it goes by very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think the question that we really have to be asking ourselves every single day that we wake up is this question of, what is the purpose of my life? What is my goal? What am I trying to actually achieve? Because if my goal is to live a worldly life, then I need to be doing certain things, and it's okay to be working 18 hours a day, right? Because that fits into that priority. But if my goal is something else, as you were mentioning, that it's for the pleasure of Allah, it's to become closer to Allah, and it's ultimately that I want to reach Jannah, then that itself is going to require a different type of focus. And I think these are two different paths. And if we find that we are saying that I want to, for example, achieve Jannah, that is my goal, but I'm walking and living a completely different path, and I'm wondering why I'm not spiritually progressing, then we have to be very clear and say, okay, well, the path that I'm actually practically going on is very different from the path that I'm speaking about. And prioritizing and really clarifying mentally that this is the goal, this is the path. I think that's a really important thing. And what that practically will entail, if we look at the lives of the Ahlul Bayt, is that there's going to be a time when we're going to have to say, okay, well, dunya is going to have to take a back seat. If my children need me, if my wife needs me, if my community needs me, then I'm going to have to be willing to take that lower pay job. That's okay. I'm willing to make 10,000 less. I'm willing to make 20,000 less. This has priority because of that end goal. And I think it's very easy to speak about, by the way, but I think it's something that we have to constantly remind ourselves on a daily basis. And, easy to speak about, very difficult to actually make those worldly sacrifices.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a very important thing, even about living a very simple life. A simplistic lifestyle goes such a long way in giving us our own peace of mind, if we're constantly thinking about moving into a bigger home, moving into, getting the latest upgrade on our car, on our cell phone, I think that cycle is a very unhealthy cycle. By us living simply, yeah, maybe we may not get a 5-bedroom home, but a 4-bedroom home. Maybe we may not live in the best, neighborhood, the most posh neighborhood, but we live in a neighborhood, where there's good people around. Maybe not at, a high scale, neighborhood, but something a little bit more, a little bit simpler than that. I met this family in Toronto, and property values in Toronto are sky high. And the person had a very interesting discussion with him, and he mentioned that that he doesn't allow his wife to work, and that even though his wife, she's a very educated woman, but he wants her to sort of take care of the kids and make sure that the kids are getting proper education and they're being instilled with the proper values. And then he said that in order for me to do this, I had to live a very simple life. He lived in like a 3-bedroom apartment. Instead of him, getting a nice big home and putting down, close to $500,000 more dollars, he chose a simple life. Why? So he can put his kids into Islamic school. And he was like, I asked myself that, what is a greater priority for me? For me to live in a bigger home, or for my kids to have proper Islamic values? And I realized that, hey, I'll sacrifice, living in a big home for the sake of my children. And I mean, I found that very, very touching that, somebody was willing to saw the value in this, in living a simple life for the sake of children. And that's something which you're right, we need to remind ourselves of those types of things.
Alhamdulillah, it's a difficult thing. It's one thing that I've recognized is that we, as people who've studied a little bit, we can talk about these things, and when it actually comes to doing it, it's very difficult. It's very difficult, and so it's one thing to conceptualize it even for ourselves, that okay, well, this is what I need to do. It's another thing to sit there and say, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to set this aside for the sake of Allah. But at the end of the day, that's the purpose of our life, and that's why Allah has put us here, to make those sacrifices, so that inshallah we can achieve that ultimate goal that we have. Sayyid, unfortunately, our time is coming to an end. It's actually come to an end 5 minutes ago, but
No
I was just
problem.
asking for any final questions. Let me see if there's any. This is a really good question. I'm tempted to leave it for another session, but yeah, someone has asked a really good question. They asked, do you have examples of youth growing up as 3rd-generation Muslims that actually are practicing and pious? And he's saying that I'm seeing that most kids who are born and raised here are now becoming parents. What about their kids? So the question is, are we going to see a Muslim community that is basically non-practicing by the 3rd or 4th generation? What is your take on this?
I hope we don't see that. The hope is that all of our entire future generations, they're all practicing, they all have proper values. I think one of the oldest communities in America is in actually Dearborn in Michigan, right? And I don't know the statistics of how many people are actually practicing, but in terms of our priority is not the 2nd, the 3rd generation. Our alaykum anfusukum, our priority is ourselves and our family members, our children, our spouses, right? That's where our priority lies. And if we're able to give them the proper education, give them the proper opportunities to learn about their religion, to practice their religion, then at the end of the day, they will live their own lives. If we can give the proper opportunities for our kids to learn their religion, and then they make the right decisions based on the teachings which they give. And if they choose they do not want to practice that, well, that's something which is beyond our control, right? We can only influence them so much. So I think, inshallah, the hope is there. We hope that the future generations, that they're all practicing, that they believe in Islam. But the society that we live in, we know it's moving in what direction? It's moving in a direction away from religion, right? To the point where even like, when we were kids, we used to say, when someone sneezed, we used to say, God bless you. Now people, they don't even say this. They say gazinta, or they say something else, or they say bless you. They don't even say the name God anymore, right? It's become something which is almost taboo to say God. So I mean, that just shows that we ourselves, that we as Muslims, that we cannot live in an isolated manner from our society. we have to be insulated from our society, right? There's a
Mm.
difference between insulation and isolation. Isolation is, yeah, we take our families, we live in the middle of nowhere in wilderness, and we completely isolate ourselves. That's not going to work for us. Why? Because eventually our kids will rebel. Our kids won't accept that, right? But if we're able to properly insulate ourselves, properly give our kids and ourselves those values and those teachings and those instructions which Islam has given us, then when they go through their hardships and difficulties, they'll be able to overcome it.
Yeah.
And
Said, when this question was asked, I actually remembered that, in America, we're a fairly new community. So, for example, there might be third generation, there might be fourth generation, but generally our experience is as second generation. And then now the third generation is slowly starting to come up as well. But when I was in home, I actually met brothers who were from Germany.
okay.
And the Germans, they had this guest worker program, maybe 80, 90 years ago. So they were actually the third or the fourth generations of their community, and they had been able to maintain a level of religiosity. So,
Mm,
is it possible? It's definitely possible, but I think it comes down to, the types of institutions and the type of focus that we have today. Literally, our efforts are going to determine whether the Muslim community as a cohesive religious community will continue, or that no, in 20, 30 years, we're going to look and we're going to see that the vast majority of the descendants of the Muslims that came in the 1970s, 1980s, no, they've kind of assimilated into society and they don't have any sense of religiosity. This depends on us. And I think that we need to be very careful about it. We need to work very hard in regards to it. And also, there is another discussion I don't want to get into, but it's definitely the question of should I leave? This idea of hijrah, which is a main part of early Islamic history, this idea of moving from one place to another in order to maintain your faith, that is a completely different um, discussion as well, which that's a whole can of worms that I don't want to get into, but that's something that should be considered as well, that it needs to be an option that's on the table. If the situation is bad enough, we need to have that, inshallah, as a consideration.
I mean, just to mention, it doesn't mean to move back to our home country. It could just mean move from one state to another state, right? It
Mm-hmm.
could mean to move from one community to another community, right? It could be to move to, a better school system, right? Hijrah doesn't mean that we all have to go back to Iran or Pakistan or India, right? It could just be meaning, I know several people who are moving to Houston because there's a full-time school there. There's young families there. There's
I mean, say
professionals there.
that's basically like moving to another country, but
In Texas.
it's a discussion, it's a discussion for another day.
Inshallah, yeah. We'll leave that for another time, inshallah. Thank you so much, Sayed, for having
Thank
me.
you,
It's been an
Sid.
honor and a privilege to be here to spend the evening. Inshallah, I hope some of the things were insightful and, like always, benefited from your knowledge. Ali Allah.
No, no, no. Say
Inshallah,
the
Allah
privilege was
protect you.
honestly all ours. Alhamdulillah. I just thank you so much for spending some time with us. I know over there it's much later. Like we're here, it's like just becoming dark right now, but on your
Okay.
end it's much darker. So thank you so much.
Inshallah, it's my pleasure, inshallah.
Inshallah. And inshallah, perhaps we didn't even get to the third or the fourth, but perhaps we can pick that up in the future.
Inshallah, khair.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Sayyid.
My pleasure.
I just also wanted to thank the audience for spending time with us, joining us tonight. And inshallah, we can continue this discussion in the coming weeks. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.